Hey guys, my name is Nico Giacino. I'm the executive chef at Lux Appliance Studio, and here we are with Food Life. The beautiful thing about Thermador's gas ranges is that we're actually able to use the star burner. It's a patent designed by Thermador, and basically what the star burner does is it allows the flame to come closer to the center of your pans, which is going to give you more even heat distribution throughout your cooking process. And speaking of cooking, we're actually going to be making one of my favorite things in the world, which is a ribeye steak. And we are going to be doing that with some green asparagus and yellow beans. We'll reduce that with a little bit of chicken stock and some butter. And then over here I have a beautiful celery root puree. So to start this recipe, first of all, I want to show you guys quickly. So I have here a beautiful ribeye steak, and what I did is I actually placed it in the fridge, and you can see it's on a tray over, it's on a rack over a tray. And essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm actually trying to air dry the steak a bit. When we go into our cooking process and we're dealing with red meats, we kind of want to make sure that the surface of our meats are dry before we're going into a pan. The big thing about dry aging your steaks is that we're really changing the chemistry of the meat, and we're also really trying to remove any moisture off the exterior. That's going to give us a really beautiful browning. So to start this process, we're going to turn our middle burner on. Whenever we're cooking, we always want to try to start with a hot pan. It doesn't make sense to start anything in a cold pan, because as you start your cooking process and you bring the heat up, you're actually starting the cooking process the minute that the pan starts to warm. So anything that you've placed into the pan might actually start to cook at a low temperature, and as it comes to a high temperature, by the time it actually hits a high temperature, you've already began the cooking process. What we're trying to do is make sure that the pan is hot so that whatever we're adding to it is going to sear and caramelize those sugars. I'm using vegetable oil for the searing process, by the way, and the reason why I'm using vegetable oil is because it has a great smoking point. It's a neutral flavor, so it's not going to transfer any other flavors into my cooking process, which is what I'm looking for. So what I did is I actually removed the steak about an hour before the cooking process, and the reason I did that was because I want the steak to come up to room temperature. It's really important when you're working with meats, especially red meats, pork, lamb, and you want to cook it all the way through to finish, to let them come up to room temperature before you actually start your cooking process. The reason being is if you're looking to grab that medium rare from your steak, which most people like, you don't want to have a cold center and then a finished outside. So really making sure it's at room temperature is a big benefit when it comes to your cooking process. You'll notice that I'm actually seasoning the steak just before I'm about to start. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to make sure that when I place it in, there we go, reduce the temperature just down a little bit. Once you get your pan to a hot temperature, you can always reduce it down. There's no need to keep it at a high temperature. We're not trying to burn the steak. We want to make sure that we're searing it, giving it that time to essentially caramelize the sugars in the meat. By having it at too high of a temperature, you actually might burn the sugars that are in the meat. I can already tell the steak is already starting to sear really nicely. So for this guy, because the pan was so hot, I'm already at the stage where I'm ready to flip. And you can already tell, that was maybe 20 seconds in the pan and I already have a really beautiful crust on there, okay? Now what I realized through the process of cooking steaks, and I've cooked at this point hundreds of them, I used to cook the steak from start to finish, one side about 1.5 minutes to 1 minute and 20 seconds, and then I would flip it and let the rest of the cooking go. Another minute, maybe 1 minute and 20 seconds, looking for that medium rare. I actually figured out that it's better to do 30 seconds on and 30 seconds off. So basically you want to flip your steak every 30 seconds. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to get a really nice crust. At the same time, once I flip that first side like we have here, I'm allowing that crust to kind of dry. And then when I go to flip it again, I'm just adding another layer of crust on top. So you're gonna see in a minute. We're gonna keep flipping this, probably another 1 or 2 more times we're gonna flip this, and you're gonna notice the crust is gonna build from this side. So you saw that, okay? Flipping our steak. Again, there's our starting crust. At this point, because I know the steak is gonna cook pretty quickly, okay? And typically, if you're looking for medium rare, you can finish your steaks right on the stovetop. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm gonna add a little bit of butter. You're gonna notice the butter is gonna brown really quickly because the pan is hot. That's what I'm looking for. Essentially when I'm browning butter, I'm creating a really nutty flavor within the butter itself. And I'm actually gonna baste my steak with this nutty butter that's gonna help infuse some really beautiful flavor. I don't know if you can see that. This is my favorite part. Whenever you're basting steaks, all that bubbly caramelization that's happening on the top, it's stunning. It's my favorite thing. Another little trick you can do to add even a little bit more flavor in this, you have to be very careful with, because we're gonna use some fresh thyme. Fresh thyme has moisture within the leaves, okay? And again, moisture and oil don't mix, so please just be very careful if you're gonna do this. But essentially, that's what we're looking for. Let it pop. Keep your face away from it because we don't want any oil hitting your face while we're doing this. Kind of pile the oil and the butter into one corner with your thyme. Allow the leaves to essentially release their water, and then you'll notice that they stop popping. And that's where we're gonna be adding in our garlic. Okay, I just have whole garlic. All I did is just crush it in my palm. Essentially, I'm doing that because I want the oil, I want the butter to penetrate within the garlic. That's gonna allow the garlic to release its natural oils. And now we're basically flavoring the steak with thyme and butter. Okay, big benefit. We haven't flipped yet. Nobody reminded me. We gotta flip now. Okay, 30 seconds. Look at that crust. Okay, really beautiful. And again, like I said, every 30 seconds, we're allowing that crust to dry. You can see there's a bit of moisture sitting on top. By the time I'm ready to flip it again, you're gonna see this is completely dry. That's what we're looking for. Stunning. Super simple. This is such a simple recipe. It's a really easy thing to cook at home. It doesn't take a lot of time. And you can wow a lot of people with this simple recipe. I'll do one last little baste here, and I'm actually really happy with that. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna flip this onto the fat side. You'll see that the steak has fat here. It's really important that you try to sear that fat. And the reason being is because when you go to cut the steak, you don't wanna be serving the steak with a big fat cap on it that hasn't been cooked down. Just like that, okay? Now the most important thing about meat is you gotta let it rest now, okay? Which is the perfect time for us to finish the rest of the dish, and this is where we're gonna add our vegetables. We're gonna create that sauce using some chicken stock and some butter. I'm gonna get rid of this because we got some burning action going on here, and we don't wanna include this flavor into the transfer of the next. Okay, so we got rid of the oil that was in there. We got rid of the garlic and the thyme. We're now gonna move on with the process. I literally just wiped out the pan, so there is still some sediment from the steak left in there. That's what I want. We're gonna add a little bit of vegetable oil, okay? We're gonna reduce our temperature just down to a medium because we don't need to be so high now. We're gonna take our yellow beans and we're gonna take our green asparagus, which I actually briefly steamed in the oven for probably about 5 minutes just to part cook them. And then I'm gonna add that to here. We're gonna just sear that off for a couple minutes. Because it's already part cooked, you don't need to cook it for very long. So just be conscious about that. I'm gonna hit it with a little bit of salt. We're gonna add the rest of this butter, okay? Probably about a tablespoon or so. Freshly ground pepper. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, now that nub of butter is melted, that's probably enough time for the vegetables to cook within the butter. So we're actually gonna add our stock in now. I'm gonna bring the flame up to a high now because I wanna start reducing that stock. Essentially, what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to reduce the water content that's in the pan and really focus on getting the majority of the chicken flavor out without too much of the water left in the pan. The butter is gonna help solidify that and basically turn it into a sauce. This might take about 2 or 3 minutes. By the time this is done cooking, our steak has rested long enough and we can basically go straight to plating. So you can tell within about 10 to 15 minutes, as long as all your prep is set up, you can pretty much finish these dishes really quick. I'm gonna grab a plate and then we're gonna plate this out. So for the plating part, we're gonna start with my plate here. As you guys know, I love purees, so we're gonna start with our celery root for the base. Okay, we're just gonna lay something right down in the middle. So I'm gonna slide these pieces just on top here. One last thing, you'll see a lot of chefs, they always do like these crazy garnishes on their plates. What we're typically using is what are called microgreens or micro-herbs. And basically this is just a really nice greenery. Some of them add a really beautiful flavor to your dish. So what I'm doing is I'm just tossing these back and forth in my hand, kind of allowing them to intertwine with each other, and that will create a nice little bundle. And I place it on top. Simple, that's it. There you go.